Alright, so this is basically part 2 of my transmission swap that I did for the AX15 transmission here in my 1972 Dodge Charger. So in the first part, I basically just described, the nature of the swap itself, what I did, where I went to grab it, and all that kind of stuff. Not really I didn't really go into detail about how to do the swap itself, so that's what I hope to do in this video, and hope to keep it somewhat short, but, Okay, so let's begin. So in my first part, I mentioned that this was a 904 3-speed. I yanked that transmission out because, well, number one, sorry guys, but I hated it. For an automatic transmission even, I did not like the shift points. I adjusted my kick down lever even to increase it a bit. And I also adjusted the second gear band to kind of tweak it a little bit, But anyway, I didn't care for it. Not for a street car, It's just, from what I'm used to driving my truck, I don't care for these old 3-speed automatics. I just don't, okay? Maybe, I'm sure they're good. They're perfect for drag racing and stuff. But I just didn't care for it personally, okay? So, again, I wanted a Charger. I've always wanted a Charger that was a manual. So, and I tried looking for the 4-speed, couldn't find it for a reasonable price, even for one that needed rebuilding. So I couldn't afford that. So I went to the junkyard, got me an AX15 5-speed transmission from a 1998 Dodge Dakota. So how the swap works, whether you have a 318, a 340, or a 360, or even a Magnum motor, a Magnum 5.2 or a Magnum 5.9, which this car currently has a 5.9 Magnum now under the hood. Doesn't matter. Pretty much every small block Chrysler will mate with the AX15 transmission if you have the Dakota V6 bell housing. Okay, that's the bell housing that you will need to mate this transmission up to any Chrysler small block. Now, as far as the 4.7 liter, well, that is a different animal. I think it has the same bolt pattern as well as the other Chrysler small blocks, but even if so, I've never really heard of a carbureted application for a 4.7 liter, because it is, after all, an overhead cam motor, and I just never heard of the aftermarket being that widely huge for the 4.7 liter engine. So this mainly applies to what I'm talking about. It applies to every Chrysler small block, with the every Chrysler small block V8, with the exception of the 4.7 liter. All right, so step one, I had to get the transmission. Step two, I had to take out the 904, disconnected, the entire linkage for it, and unbolted it from the motor, dropped it out. And with the AX15, really it's just a bolt-in deal. It bolts on just like a 904 or any other, small block Chrysler transmission. Once you have the V6 bell housing on it and everything, bolts right up. And with the 4 speeds, I know you have to remove a large section of the tunnel to get it to fit. I think it's like, it starts somewhere like right up here, and you have to remove it down to like here and then all the way back here. It's a side loader transmission. That's what they call them, is a side loader. So you have to remove the whole, like a good portion of the side, the sheet metal from the side here on this tunnel for that side loader transmission. The AX15 is a top loader, as you can see. So all I had to do was cut a rectangular hole for the shifter tower on the AX15. You may want to build a hump for it, or make a hump for it, because this is not, the way this is right now is not perfect whatsoever. This bezel that I made here is just a chunk of aluminum that I cut out and drilled holes through. It's pretty ugly actually, but it works. But it's a top loader, so I just had to cut a rectangular hole through the top, for the shifter tower. No hump, no anything like that, just cut a rectangular hole for the shifter. For the pedals, since I'm in here, and talk about the pedals. The pedals are 4-speed pedals, reproduction, that I bought on eBay for, I think it was 71 to 74 B and E bodies for the pedals. So I am using reproduction 4-speed pedals. It comes with the support bracket for the clutch and the big ol' heavy spring and pivot pin and everything for a 4-speed setup. I still have the spring and the pivot pin. They're just stowed away somewhere. Obviously, I'm not using them for this 5-speed setup. But it comes with the pedals and everything you need, of course. Now, the cool thing about that is if in the future, I decide to ditch this 5-speed and I get my hands on an actual A833 4-speed, I can still run that setup too, because I have that big fat spring and the pivot pin. So, you know, I can still run the 4-speed if I want to. I'll just have to modify the tunnel again. But, so that's pretty cool. But that's what I'm doing for pedals. They're just 4-speed pedals. Now, for the hydraulic clutch system, I am using all complete 1998 Dodge Dakota hydraulics. Okay, that includes a 1998 Dodge Dakota clutch master cylinder, which I've mounted to the firewall, and a 1998 Dodge Dakota slave cylinder, which is an external slave, so it bolts to the outside of the bell housing, just like it would in the truck. And then I'm using a 3 AN diameter hose for the hydraulic clutch hose that connects from the clutch master to the slave cylinder. So the hydraulics are actually very damn simple. It's just master cylinder behind the clutch pedal with a 3 AN hose going to the slave cylinder that's behind the bell housing for the external slave cylinder. And it all fits pretty perfectly, actually. There's no, the only thing I had to do was, let me open my door here and get level with the floor underneath, so I can show you better here. The lighting's not good, but so here's the clutch pedal, and there's the master cylinder rod. It's bolted to my clutch pedal. Now there is already like a hole in the clutch pedal, and there's like a pin rather also. The lighting's pretty poor, so I don't think you can see very well, but anyway, to do this hydraulic setup, what I had to do was I had to drill a custom hole in this pedal. It's about, I think, a couple inches down from where the factory one is, up higher on the pedal. I just had to drill a hole down lower, and I shoved a bolt through that hole with washers and a nut, and you can see that the clutch rod, the master cylinder clutch rod, connects to the end of that bolt. Sorry. And then I have it finished off with another washer and a nut that's just basically hand tightened. And this rod goes into here's the clutch master cylinder right here. The nice thing about these Mopars, even though if you have an automatic if you have an automatic transmission Mopar like this Charger is, originally a 904 3-speed, the cool thing is it has dimples pre-made in the firewall here that are basically clear marked indicators of where you have to drill. To fit this hydraulic clutch master cylinder, all I had to do was drill 2 holes in the firewall, one down here and then one right there on top, as you can see. Just 2 holes. And I did elongate them a bit to give me a little more, adjustment, but they're elongated holes that I drilled. And the clutch master will have these studs built into it, and all I did was literally just put a washer and a nut on each one, and that's what secures the clutch master to the firewall. Now, it's not perfect because the firewall is actually made of pretty thin sheet metal, and as I was bolting up this clutch master to the firewall, it started to cave this metal portion inward a little bit, but it's not perfect, but it's fine. It works just fine. So that's how I bolted this clutch master cylinder, a 1998 Dodge Dakota clutch master, to the firewall. Just drill these couple holes, which, like I said, these holes will be pre-dimpled from the factory,
So you don't even have to measure or make any marks or anything. The dimples are already perfectly located, and you'll know exactly where to drill. Okay? So you drill your 2 holes, and then from under the hood on the outside, you fish your clutch master through, down through the engine bay, feed it through here, and then add a washer, and I put on nylock bolts so it stays tight. So just washers and bolts, or washers and nuts. Okay? 2 nuts, basically. Yeah, that came out right, didn't it? And this elongated hole here is already made, whether your old Mopar is an automatic or a manual. This hole, you don't have to drill out or cut out or anything. This hole's already here. It'll just be plugged up with a large rubber grommet from the factory if it's an automatic. All I did was just remove the grommet, and there's the hole. So, really stupid simple. Alright? Now, the lighting in here sucks, but there's the clutch support bracket right here, the clutch pedal support bracket. You can't see it because it's dark, but it's held on by 2 bolts on the firewall. Again, they're pre-dimpled, so you just drill them through. And you will need to make like a bracket. This clutch pedal support bracket here, again, it has studs coming through for the bracket. Now, those studs aren't part of the bracket, of course. The studs have to come in through the front side of the firewall under the engine bay. And what I did was, I think you can buy this piece online. It's basically just a metal bar that's got 2 studs on it. It's part of the 4-speed setup, I guess. I didn't buy that part. I just made my own using a flat piece of metal that's about, I think 3/16 inch thick. And I just drilled a couple holes in it, one on each end of that rectangular piece of metal. Shoved a couple bolts through it, and those acted as my studs. And I shoved it through the front side of the firewall. I'll pop the hood and I'll show you real quick. Gotta put you down for a sec, hang on. Just show you this real quick. Let's see if it works this time. Yep, it did. There's the 5.9 Magnum. Okay. So here's a brake booster. On this side of the brake booster, you see this right here? This piece is what I'm talking about. It's, like I said, it's just a flat piece of rectangular metal, about 4 inches long, I think. Let's get a better angle of it here. It's about 4 inches long, and as you can see, I just drilled a couple holes, one on each end, shoved a couple bolts through, secured the bolts with nuts, and those are acting as my studs for the clutch pedal support bracket that's on the inside. Like I said, you can buy this piece pre-made already for the 4-speed pedal setup. I didn't buy it, I just made my own using a rectangular piece of metal and drilled a couple holes in it. Okay? But these are bolts and they're acting as my studs. So that's and here's the clutch master reservoir. I just took this off of a Dodge Ram at the junkyard. I just got the reservoir with the cap, and I just drilled a couple holes in the inner fender apron. Self-explanatory, right? Just mounted it right here. I found no other spot for it, really. And this hose right here runs down to the clutch master, which I'm not sure if I'll be able to pick up the clutch master from here very well. It's the clutch master, which I showed you from inside the car. It's right here, and it angles downward. The Dakota clutch masters angle downward, and that's not a problem at all. The only thing that translates to is having to drill the custom hole in your 4-speed clutch pedal because of that angle. But I just showed you that it's not a problem. But there's a clutch master from the outside here, or the inside of the engine bay. That's what it looks like. Runs that hose up to this clutch master reservoir. And I showed you that piece there that you need. Okay? So those are the components. Let me get underneath the car here real quick. And I don't think I'll be able to see this very well right now, but there's a slave cylinder. It's a external factory slave for a 1998 Dodge Dakota. And here's my 3AN line I was telling you about that connects to the slave cylinder. Now, in the beginning, I did use the factory, I think it's nylon, that factory preformed nylon line. I think I just cut it up, shortened it up a bit to make it work for the car. It worked, but what happened was I loosened up my torsion bars one day to lower my ride height a bit, and that line was about here. Well, anyway, at that time when I lowered the torsion bars, that line made contact with this exhaust pipe. And I drove the car for about 15 minutes down the road away from my house, and you could probably guess what happened. The exhaust pipe melted the frickin' AN, or that nylon clutch line, and all my clutch fluid ran out, and I had no clutch, and I had to have the car towed back home. So at that point, I replaced it with this 3N line and secured it with what do you call it? Self-tapping screws and these little 3AN diameter clamps, hose clamps. Really simple. That's all it is 3AN hose line. But that's what connects the master, the clutch master, to the slave cylinder. And that's how that's set up. As you can see, it fits pretty well underneath the B-body Mopar. Okay. Now, get back in the car. So that is the pedal setup. The bracket tree that I told you about, and the couple holes you have to drill to the firewall for the clutch master, and as well as the clutch pedal support bracket, showing you via the metal bar with the 2 bolts through it that act as studs. You need those studs to come through the firewall for that bracket to mount to. I showed you that. The clutch master reservoir and all that, showed you that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I left out. That's essentially it as far as making this swap. Like I said, you know, the transmission itself, it's just like, you know, bolting up, like rebolting up the 904 if you have the right, if you have the Dakota V6 bell housing. It'll fit behind any Mopar small block. Not sure about the 4.7 liter, but why would you want to put a 4.7 liter in an old Mopar anyway? There's no carbureted intakes for it or anything, and the distributor won't work for that matter anyway, because the 4.7 liter doesn't have a distributor. It's got coil on plugs. So, but Mopar small blocks, if you got the V6 Dakota bell housing. Transmission bolts right up. Cut your hole, your rectangular hole for the shifter. And oh yes, that is the one thing I left out, the shifter itself. The shifter of whatever vehicle you get it out of, I actually originally grabbed my shifter out of a Jeep because I thought it would fit better. And actually when I grabbed this AX15 from the Dakota that I grabbed it from, it didn't even have a shifter mounted on it anyway. Someone took it. So I robbed a shifter off a Jeep and thought that would work better anyway, but it didn't. It needed modification. So I just went ahead and scrapped it completely, and I made my own shifter. I know I've talked about this a little bit in previous videos, but for the shifter, you guys might have to figure out your own solution. My solution was a completely handmade shifter. The shifter itself is just made out of 3/8 inch thick plate steel that I bought from a metal supply. I believe it was the dimension, it was a rectangular steel plate, and I believe it was 4 inches wide. If say the rectangle is horizontally facing this way, it was 4 inches wide and I think about 14 inches long.
And I made a cardboard template of this shifter itself and traced it onto the steel plate, and then I took an angle grinder and cut it out, cut this whole thing out. And this part down here, underneath the boot right here at the top, it's just angled downward. It's a rectangular, it's angled downward, still rectangular shaped. So if you can picture that, I know I just totally failed at explaining how that would look, but keep this rectangular shape, go downward, and it just stops right underneath this shitty zip tie that I have right here. It just stops right here, and it's still that rectangular shape. So I welded that to the shifter base. Basically, you just welded it on, because there's no way to really bolt it onto the existing shift tower. So I just welded it onto the part that connects to the base. I have pictures I can show you, but yeah, so you just weld it. And I made these wood grips just out of some cheap plywood that I had laying around. You know, it was very light colored wood. I just threw a couple of coats of stain on it. And I think I cut these out of, oh damn, I forget. I cut them out with something. It was just rectangular pieces of plywood. I cut them out somehow. And then I contoured them. I made little finger grip things. I used a Dremel sanding bit to make the contours. But anyway, most of that I'm sure is pretty self-explanatory. But this shifter itself is homemade. You will need to figure out a shifter solution when you make this swap. That's probably the most, if anything, most involved part, is making a shifter that'll work. And it depends on the vehicle too, but in old B-body Mopars, I particularly wanted a pistol grip style, like a Hearst pistol grip, but I was too poor to actually buy one and, you know, modify it and whatnot. And that would be, I thought it would be a waste of money to, you know, buy an expensive Hearst pistol grip and then, you know, dick it up by welding it and shit from the bottom. You know, I just thought that wouldn't be practical. So, and I couldn't afford one anyway. So I made this whole thing literally with $4. $4 is what it cost me for that metal plate. That 3/8 inch thick, 4-inch by 14-inch plate. $4. So I made this for obviously dirt cheap, and it took me about, I don't know, took a few hours maybe to make it from start to finish. But nonetheless, that is a solution. That is an obstacle you will have to work out with this swap, is the shifter. Maybe you guys would find a better way to do it. Me, like I said, I just homemade my own pistol grip knockoff, because it's kind of the style I wanted anyway, so I made one. Other than that, guys, everything that I just covered with the pedals, the brackets, the clutch master, and the slave cylinder, no kidding, that's it. That's all that takes to make this swap. So, and as far as the clutch assembly itself, meaning the clutch disc, the pressure plate, and flywheel, I'll cover that real quickly, because I know this video is already freaking almost 24 minutes long, and I apologize for the lengthy video. I try not to make long videos, guys, but it always, you know how it goes, it always turns out to be much longer than I want. Sorry about that. Anyway, last thing, the clutch assembly itself. This is what you want to do. So for the flywheel, if you have a 318 in here, or a 340, any internally balanced Mopar small block, you want to use a neutrally balanced flywheel, of course. And the flywheel that I used was a modern 143 tooth flywheel, neutral balance, for anywhere, like for instance, I ordered mine for a 1999 Dodge Ram 1500 with a 5.2. That was the flywheel that I used for when I had my 318, my LA 318 in here. The flywheel bolted up perfectly, and it's neutral balance, so I didn't have any, you know, vibration or shaky issues. I mean, the engine will have its harmonics, you know, within certain RPM ranges where it'll, you know, vibrate more than other RPMs. But as far as like, you know, it's not an issue. I mean, we're talking like shaking the car. Not an issue. You want to use a neutrally balanced flywheel. Now, if you have a 5.9 or even a LA 360, well, actually, no, let me back up there. I have a 5.9 Magnum now in this car. I am using a flywheel for a 5.9 Magnum. I believe I ordered, it was a flywheel for a 1998 Dodge Ram 1500 with a 5.9 Magnum. As you guys probably could tell, I like to order stuff for a 1998 or a 1999. It really does not matter. You can do it for a 2000, 2001, you know, any Dodge Ram with a 5.9 Magnum. Order a flywheel for it. That's what I did. If you have a 360 and you want to do this, I'm sorry, an LA 360, and you want to run this setup, I'm not sure what flywheel you can use. You may be able to use the 143 tooth modern flywheel. I'm thinking it's the harmonic balancer that may be different between the LA 360 and the Magnum 360. I may be wrong. You may have to, if you're running an LA 360 motor, you may have to use the LA balancer as well as an LA 360 flywheel. But I'm not sure. If I want to take a guess at it, I'm going to guess that the 143 tooth Magnum flywheel, 360 flywheel, may work. It's a I forget it's meant for an 11-inch or 12-inch clutch. The older ones, I believe, the older flywheels, I believe, were for a 10.5-inch clutch. But if I was to guess, you may get away with the modern flywheel, but you'll have to use an LA balancer. That may still be incorrect, so don't hold me to that. I'm just taking a guess. I'm not saying that's the correct option whatsoever. You'll have to figure that out. With Magnums, it's pretty dang easy because you can just find a Magnum balancer at the junkyard when you pull your 5.9 or 5.2 Magnum from the junkyard. It'll have the balancer attached to it usually, so you don't have to worry about that. But for the flywheel, if you want to order a flywheel to, when you make this, you know, to work with this swap, the flywheel is easy. You just order it for, you know, like I said, any Dodge Ram or whatever that has a 5.9, or even a Dakota that has a 5.9. You know, some 90s, early 2000s Ram or Dakota with a 5.9. So, because the 360 LA and the 360 Magnum are balanced differently. Even though they're both external balance, they're different still between the LA and the Magnum 360. So if you have an LA 360 in here and you want to do a AX15, you're gonna have to figure that one out. I haven't done enough research to let you guys know how to go about that. Okay, as far as finding a compatible flywheel for that. But with Magnums, it's pretty easy. So, all right, guys. Well, so that's pretty much the swap. If I left anything out, which I'm sure I have, just ask me in the comment section below. Ask me any questions you may still have if you're interested in making an AX15 5-speed transmission swap and your old Mopar, B-body, E-body Mopar, A-body, which, you know, you may have to ask somebody else because I don't have any experience with A-bodies, but B-body, E-bodies, you want to do an X15 swap, yeah, just feel free to ask me any questions down below, and I'd be more than happy to help you guys out. All right, so, all right, guys, well, thanks for watching. See you on the next one.